Hey dancers, welcome back to Broche Banter, your home for thought-provoking conversations about what it means to pursue this beautiful art form of ballet in adulthood. I'm Julie, your host. Today I am thrilled to have Kelsey Maloney-Steiner from the Facet Dance Collective back on the show. In this episode, Kelsey talks about overcoming fear in her personal Pointe journey and how she found the freedom to be authentic through dance. Also, we share some insights into the challenges and joys of creating choreography for both individuals and groups. Stay all the way until the end where we really dive deeply into what it means to listen to this inner voice that we all have. Spoiler alert, it's scary to follow, but eventually we realize that this voice is responsible for everything we have that's good in our lives. Each of us has so much to offer this world. If you're a dancer and you'd like to share your story with Ballet on Broche Banter, or if you're a teacher or a fellow adult educator, whether it's ballet or another sport, activity, or art form that you teach to adult learners, please feel free to get in touch. I would love to have you on the show. My email address is hello@brocheballet.com. That's HELLO@BROCHE ballet.com. And with that, please enjoy this episode with Kelsey. I know it'll leave you inspired and ready to dance. Kelsey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you on Broche Banter today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
We have a lot to cover. Kelsey, every time you and I chat, it could go for hours and hours and hours. But today we want to talk a lot about ballet as a whole, but specifically getting into performing and Pointe and choreographing and creating and dreaming and all this really fun stuff. So let's dive in. You and I are both just coming off of our week together at the International Adult Ballet Festival. So obviously performing is fresh on our mind. This year you took a really big leap and performed a beautiful Pointe solo on stage, including with pirouettes in your Pointe shoes. That's come a really long way, because when you and I started working on Pointe together, leaving the bar was kind of a pipe dream at that point. And now here you are doing actual pirouettes on the stage. I think I want to dive right in there first, if we can, just diving right into Pointe, because so many of our listeners and so many people in our community have a dream of Pointe shoes, but not just looking at the Pointe shoes, like dancing in the Pointe shoes, like expressing in the Pointe shoes and having it be a part of your dance vocabulary. So what's that journey been like for you? I know it's had so many ups and downs. Let's kind of dive in there a little bit.
Yeah. So if we go all the way back to the first time I was put on Pointe, I should not have been put on Pointe. And that was where a lot of it really started.
Was that young?
No, it was 6 months into starting ballet as an adult.
I see.
And my teacher was like, yeah, go get Pointe shoes. I did not have the technical foundation yet with alignment or strength to really be in Pointe shoes. And so I went to a class and she made me try a pirouette in the center on Pointe.
After 6 months of doing ballet overall?
After 6 months and the very first day in my Pointe shoes. So maybe 20 minutes into wearing them.
Wow, that's bold. And
it was, yes. And it terrified me. And I was like, this is not for me. We're not doing this. So then I just didn't do Pointe for like 2 years post that. Because it was just like, that was horrible. I felt unsafe. I didn't feel like I could say no. It was bad. So that's sort of where the Pointe fear, I think, started. But also there's this, as an adult starting Pointe, you have a fully developed nervous system. So obviously our nervous system is going to be like, yeah, standing on your toes, not a very safe thing to do, even when you have the strength and you've worked on it a lot. Your nervous system is still going to be primed to be like, let's not do this. Mm-hmm. So I had sort of both of those going against me. But I restarted Pointe with you, I guess probably 6 months before that first IVF where we did the swans piece.
I see. I don't think I even realized that it was that fresh for you at that point of the swans piece.
Yeah, maybe it was, I went back to doing with you in the fall before that, because I was definitely doing bar with you at that point.
Yep.
Just like the beginner Pointe classes, but we were not leaving the bar. I was holding on tight to that bar.
Right.
But swans got me off the bar, sort of.
Yeah, we did a Swan Lake excerpt, kind of a less popular Swan Lake excerpt. That's a lot of like PKs and walking on Pointe and bourrées on Pointe and pas de bourrées on Pointe. There's not too many things on one leg, but certainly getting that 5 steps in a row up on Pointe was a big lift from leaving the bar.
Yeah, and even when we performed it, I think only half the PKs were actually getting on my box. Mm-hmm. And they all had bent knees. Like I went and watched it the other day and I was like, you know what? I was trying really hard and I could be really proud of where it was. but also there are things that I was like, wow, my fear was still really getting in my way, even
Yeah.
though I felt like I'd really overcome this big thing.
Mhm.
But my original plan was doing swans was going to be like, that was my point, and I was going to retire from point after that because I was just like, this is not fun. I
Yeah.
really feel so much fear still. I just like it's a battle every time. But then obviously you perform and you're like, no, this was amazing. I want to keep doing this.
I see. So that was
So
gonna be
that
the
plan
end
didn't
for
work.
you. You wanted to quit Point. You were like, "Okay, I'm just gonna perform on Point. I'm gonna check that box, and then I'm just gonna hang up these shoes and move on with my ballet life, and it'll be
Yeah.
totally fine." But then it was actually a turning point for you when you looked at it and you said, "Actually, I want more of this. This was actually really fun."
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then that whole next year, I worked up to the Pharaoh's Daughter variation,
Yeah.
which I did the next year at 0.75 speed because I could never get it up to full speed because there was
Mhm.
still so much fear. And that, I mean,
That was big
I
though.
worked for like 10 months on Balinese, like at the bar, away from the bar, one hand on the bar, holding a wall. Like I did everything I could do to try to change my brain's relationship with point. And
Mhm.
it took 10 months just to get like Balinese down. And most of that variation is a lot of like stylized point walking, a few PKs, but a lot of like pas de bourrées and Balinese. If
Mhm.
people, it's not a super common variation, so people probably don't really know it. If you want to look it up, it's Farrah's Daughter Third River variation. Super pretty. It has a lot of really nice port de bras. It's one of my strengths as a dancer. So I was like, this is pretty. It looks easy. I can probably work up to this. And I had a romantic tutu so that no one could see if my knees were bent.
Right. The romantic tutu is where it's at.
It was definitely a decision I really thought about. I was like, there can be no platter tutus for this.
Yeah.
Like, we're not there yet. But I still wanted to wear a tutu. So that work was really done mostly with you and mostly at home
Mhm.
because I wasn't really ready to face doing point in the studio yet.
Mhm.
And at that point, I didn't really have access to an in studio point class either. So it was a lot of like taking a step and really breaking it down to like the bare minimum and
Yeah. So
doing each of those parts like thousands of times by
yeah.
itself. And even then, I still feel like I felt a lot of fear on stage last year
Mhm.
doing it. Like my heart rate went up. It was very much like I didn't feel as free dancing. I didn't feel like I could emotionally express as much because there still was a lot of fear and discomfort in my point shoes. It
Mhm.
had come a long way, and I was doing stuff in the center, and it didn't look like it had as much fear. But internally, I think I still had about the same amount of fear.
Mhm.
And then this year, I was going to do a different variation, but then I found a song I liked more. That was a whole thing. But when I went to choreograph it, I was like, okay, well, I want there to be some more advanced point skills because I want to work up to that. And so I started it in January and then really worked hard on it over the summer. But I was actually watching the video of the first time I did it in my point shoes because I learned it on flat and then I tried it in my point shoes. And I almost want to post like back to back because the first version versus what happened on stage is like they're just like not even comparable.
I would love
Um,
to see that. Yeah. That I would
and
love to
it's
see
like
that.
I actually kind of laughed at myself.
Yeah.
I also laughed at myself the first time I did it, which that was a huge turning point when I could learn to laugh at myself
Mhm.
in dancing and just be like, no, failure is something to be celebrated.
Mhm.
Like every time I try something and fail on point, that's it. Like it doesn't have to mean something about me or as a dancer or as a person. It's just like, whoa, I tried something, it didn't work. Okay. Um, so there's a lot of laughing at myself and learning this point dance. But I worked with a teacher who she's actually very much like you in a lot of ways. She's really good at encouraging people, but also she challenges you in like an exciting way.
Mhm.
And so we found a lot of really creative ways to work on and distract my brain while I'm doing the point skills
Yeah.
so that we could rewire the fear
Mhm.
piece.
Mhm.
Um, so we did, I'm trying to think of like the most silly one we did. Um, Gosh, we did so many pirouette preparation. Probably the silliest one was is beret in fifth, plie to a passe. But every time I got to the passe, I had a clap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a clap in a different place each time. So it was like challenging me to find my center, even if my arms are changing.
Yeah.
But also my brain was focused on clapping and not necessarily getting my foot up there,
Mm-hmm.
which allowed my feet to just do what they knew to do, which was like basically a frappe without my brain getting in the way and be like, no, you can't do that. That's bad. Don't stand on your toes. Um,
Yeah.
but we had to come up with all these creative solutions for that. And then we ran it just multiple times in a row. So my brain would be so tired that I couldn't be thinking about it. And I
Mm-hmm.
finally got to a point, I feel like in July, where I finally wasn't afraid of my shoes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came off stage, I was like, wow, I didn't feel any fear of my shoes.
Wow, that's
And I like
huge.
got to dance and felt free and complicated by the fact I had a foot injury.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I was able to not feel fear even while injured was huge. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's been a really long journey to get there. But I feel like the biggest thing for me was accepting that my nervous system is not going to love point, and that's okay. Like, I can't change 30 years of my nervous system knowing what is dangerous, but I can help it learn that this is not something to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen overnight. Like, for me, this has been a 3-year journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure it will continue as I try different new, harder skills. Like, my brain is probably going to freak out. It does this really nice thing. Sometimes I'll go to prep for a pirouette and I'll just be like, absolutely not. And it'll take me all the way to the floor. Like, I'll be like, why am I sitting on the floor? What happened? And it's my brain just took over and was like, this is not a good idea. You're going to sit on the floor because that ends this bad idea. And
Yep.
that's all happening at an unconscious level. And learning to work with that instead of get mad at it has been really helpful, but also really hard at certain points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not getting mad at it is tough because you think like, oh, this is so silly. Why is this happening? Or like, why can't I just do this? Or why am I so blocked on this? Or I just need to break through. Or you can really start to belittle your own fear. But
Mhm,
when you start, and I think this happens in all walks of life, not just in ballet, that you can belittle
mhm,
yourself for not being able to do something that seems so simple that everyone else can do, or that shouldn't be that big of a deal, or I shouldn't be scared of this or whatever. And it's like, well, but I am. So what are we going to do now? Like that's I always say, like, what are my options? That's like my question when I'm in that stage. Like, what are my options here? What can we, this is where we are. So what can we do about it? And I feel like that could be super fun. Like I also love doing a passe or pirouette and having to throw a ball at somebody, or
mhm,
like having to throw something, or having to do something with your coordination, or having to sing a song while you're doing it, or like something that gets you out of your head. Because it is exactly what you said. You can't help what you're afraid of, but you can teach yourself slowly, slowly, slowly to have a different reaction to the thing, little by little, step by step. And I think we've both seen this with our dogs, that we've helped through a lot of difficult
mhm,
things. I think it gives you so much hope that you can, quote unquote, teach an old dog new tricks, that you can
mhm.
retrain yourself, and you can, with patience and with snacks, you can go step by step to the next thing. I mean, it's huge because you can see in the video, especially the close-up one, where you can actually see a joyful face when you come out of the
Mhm,
pirouette. You don't see like a glazed over eye. You
mhm.
actually see somebody who looks happy in their point shoes when you actually look at the video footage. It's very clear. It's very clear.
I like to think of it as when babies learn to walk, like the very first steps babies take, it takes them 3,000 steps to get to a place where they're just like mediocre beginner walkers that they fall over, every once in a while. But in those 3,000 steps, do we ever like yell at the baby, oh, you should be good at this by now? No, we don't. Because that would be idiotic.
Yeah.
But yet, as we learn ballet as adults, we often need that same number of repetitions, 3,000 of something, just to be a mediocre beginner.
Yep.
And so with Point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to do this 3,000 times and suck at it 3,000 times. And that's okay. Because
Okay.
every one is one closer to that 3,000 number.
Right. And it takes, after they become a mediocre beginner, it takes many more years before they look chill doing it. Like a
Yeah.
3-year-old walking is not chill. Like they don't look
Not
chill. They
chill.
don't look natural. They're like awkward arms. They're running like weird speeds, and they
And
look
they just
super
run
off
into
balance.
things.
Yeah, they run into things. They're not looking where they're going. They're totally not paying attention. So it's like 3 years into it and they still don't look normal. Like they still don't look like an adult human walking.
Yeah.
It's
And I
part of,
think
yeah,
as
it's part of the
adults, we're
process.
just like, no, I'm better than that. Like, I have more development. My brain is ready for this. And that is true in some senses,
Hmm.
that as adult learners, we do bring a wealth of like proprioceptive experience and movement quality just from being human. But when we're trying to do something brand new, we are not going to get it really any quicker. It's still going to take that number of repetitions.
Yeah. And if not more, in the sense that you have a fear response that you're dealing with,
Mhm.
whereas the baby is not afraid to fall again. They just get up
Mm-mm.
again. Whereas us, it takes us longer to be ready to get up again because it was kind of scary and it kind of hurt. And we're worried about getting hurt. And, we have a job that we have to go to tomorrow. So we can't really get that hurt. And it's a little
Yeah.
more complicated relationship with falling. It's a little more complicated.
Yeah, and there's embarrassment and shame and like shoulds. We have these whole inner dialogues now that tell us things that babies don't have. And
Yep.
the fact we also are much higher off the ground.
Yes.
So there's a lot longer way to fall, just at a physical level, but also at a metaphorical level. There's like a lot more to falling. There's a lot
Yeah.
farther we go.
So you talk a lot about wanting to, like, just in that little, like, away from the technical side of it, in that sort of description, you talked a lot about wanting to be able to be free and to be emotionally expressive and to be able to create and to be able to kind of like be one with the piece, and that you almost felt like the point shoes was standing between you and
Mhm.
this feeling of freedom. Like, what is that? What is that feeling of freedom that you're searching for? Like, what is that? Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk more about that. I mean, in the context of point shoes, sure, but also just like, what is this that you're talking about, that you want, that the point shoes, now this time we're not standing between you and that. What is this
Mhm.
feeling?
That's a really good question. I think it's authenticity.
Hmm.
That like when I'm dancing is when I feel the most authentic and present
Mm-hmm.
to myself and my story or my emotions that day. And especially through performing, it's like this very unique, particular experience of authenticity that you're getting to share like the whole you with the audience with really no expectation of how the audience is going to receive you back. It's like you're just giving it to them and letting them do what they want with it.
Hmm.
Which, when you put pressure on it, there's also like, oh, but they're going to judge me, all that. I don't really experience that piece of performing and like the anxiety of performing. I experience it as like, this is a moment that's carved out just for me where I get to be fully authentically telling this story.
Hmm.
And I think that's why I feel most like myself on stage,
Mm-hmm.
um, which has been something I like have struggled with and processed more in the aftermath of the intensive is like, how do I find being myself when I'm not on stage
Mm-hmm.
or when I'm not dancing, when I'm not in this dance context?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is where I feel the most like myself. And when something is getting in the way of that, it's very frustrating to me. Um, and so, like, the stories I bring to stage are ones that are very personal and deep. And I want to be able to fully embody those stories in the way that my brain conceives and my body feels. And so, when I can't do that, it's like, I don't even know how to explain this internal tension I feel, but it's like I get so angry and frustrated and disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I don't even I can't think of another thing in life that feels like that to me.
I can, in the sense that I have the similar thing with singing, where I
Mhm,
hear the music in my head and it doesn't come out of my mouth the way I imagine it. And there's a deep frustration in the musicality that I can feel and that I experience
mhm,
inside of my body. There's an emotion that I can physically feel inside when I'm listening to the music that does not match what comes out when what I'm creating. And I wonder if that's also when, little kids are learning how to talk and they're very frustrated that they can't express their emotions
mm,
correctly when they're, very young, and they're learning language and they're learning about their emotions and they're learning what they're feeling and they're like trying to put the words to it, but they can't. And that's a very frustrating experience. Or like a writer who's trying to get the words on the page the way that they are in their head. I think this is like a very human thing where what you feel inside is not matching what's outside. And I think that's when you feel a lot of tension. And something, I try to
mhm.
speak about in my artistry classes. How do you get your face to match what's inside your head? Like, how do you get your
Yeah,
facial expression to match what's in your brain? Because we spend our whole life detaching from it, or we don't have the tools to getting into it. I do feel like that integration of what's inside and what's outside is like very important for
mhm.
us I don't know if it's for everybody, but certainly for people who are trying to create art. I think that's a very frustrating, but I can see it
Yeah.
in little kids too. They get very frustrated when no one's understanding them. No one wants to be misunderstood. It feels very bad to be misunderstood.
Yeah. And that's actually something I process with my own therapist a lot is this disconnect between how I feel internally and all my experiences and then what's happening externally and how I connect to others.
Hmm.
Almost always feels like it doesn't match.
Hmm.
And dance is one of the only places where it starts to feel like it matches.
Hmm.
And I think some of that is like where performing and like telling the story means so much to me is because I get to let them match for a minute
Yep.
without judgment and with a lot of freedom. Just like, wow, suddenly they fit.
Yeah. I personally have a very similar experience with the stage and with performing, which is interesting because so many people have a great fear of judgment when they come to the stage. But to me, I feel that's where the least judgment exists. Because what are they going to do? It's my time up there and it's my time to share with them. And like, it's really not a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I wonder because you were a competitive swimmer, did you feel this freedom when you were in the pool when you were swimming, or is this specific to dance? Like, is this all
Yeah.
performing things you've done, or is this specific to dance? I'm curious for you what this is.
Yeah, so it actually was the opposite in swimming. I
Hmm.
had so much performance anxiety that I actually like would go best times in practice that I couldn't go in meets,
Hmm.
which
That's
was
opposite.
so frustrating. And I went through like sports psychologists, therapists, everything, and we could not figure it out.
Hmm.
Now I think I know more of what it was at the time, but it's actually very much quite the opposite. Like I feel I judged myself so harshly that I put so much anxiety on performance, and it was so measured. There was a quantified number with that, whereas with dance, there's not a quantified number. So it's easier, I think, for me to let go of that judgment. And I also approached dance when I started dance. It was because I needed a hobby, and I was like, "What can I not get worse at?" And so, because I know it sounds really bad now that I love dance and like,
Oh, that is
but I was
hysterical,
literally a
Kelsey.
fish out of water. Like, I injured myself walking upstairs in college. Like, it's bad. Like, I told
What
my
can I
coach,
not get worse at? The bar is set at
the
negative
bar is set
100.
so
So
low, right? And I told my coach, because this was a year and a half after I retired from swimming that I think I started dancing, maybe 2 years. And I told my coach, and he just laughed hysterically. He's like, "There's no way you're going to be a dancer. Like, I can't even imagine you trying this." But then it turned out like things clicked in dance for
yeah.
me. Um, and I'm not very coordinated in day to day life, but in dance, I find I'm actually fairly coordinated and have a very high level of body awareness to different things.
Hmm.
Um, so I think like the freedom I think comes from it's not quantifiable for me. It's also not something I started with like I need to be successful at this. There's not a pressure of like I need to reach a certain point. It's more of like what's the journey going to get me and where am I going to learn about myself and creating it's more of an expression thing than a success oriented.
Hmm. So is it's interesting. It's interesting in a couple of different things. First of all, it's interesting that point shoes seem to have taken a different approach. Like point seems almost, and I
Mhm.
think in part because point is very black and white. You got up or you
Yeah.
didn't. I think it does put more judgment and fear on people. Like it also has the danger aspect, but it sounds like you had a bit of self-judgment there, even though in dance as a whole you didn't, because it was like, I suck at this. This isn't for me. Like I'm falling. I'm not going to get this. Like it's always interesting that point shoes kind of bring that out in us. And I think that's almost a universal. It's very rare that I meet
Yeah.
someone who that doesn't have that impact on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I thought about that a lot as I prepared the solo true colors. Is like, what is it specifically about point? And I don't think I ever really came to a good conclusion. Um, I think I have a pretty good grasp on the nervous system fear side of it,
Mm-hmm.
but there is something about point that I have somehow the story has become stuck. And like to be a good dancer or to reach this goal, I have to be able to dance on point and I have to be able to dance on point without fear. And I feel like this summer I was finally able to sort of let go of that story to just be like, it is what it is. Like, I don't have to be a good point dancer to really enjoy ballet or to even enjoy point. I don't necessarily have to ever get good at this. it's okay to just keep making steps.
Mhm.
So, like, if at the beginning of the summer, I was like, if I don't get this pirouette, like, it's okay. We have an option. I had a backup option. Here's what you're going to do if you don't feel comfortable on stage. And I just like accepted, like, okay, I have an option. This will feel good. I'll still be able to perform it. I'm still going to work all summer on this pirouette because maybe I'll get there.
Mhm.
And I think letting go of that, like, I need to get there, actually let me get there.
That irony drives me insane,
I
Kelsey.
know.
I
I
hate
know.
that so much. It's so annoying. And I just came from a singing lesson. We were trying to do fast notes, and she's like, "You have to let it go." And I'm like, "I don't want to, Kelly. I don't want to let it go. I want to control every one of these notes." And then, of course, you
Yes.
let it go and they come out perfectly. And it's like, why? 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 It's so
Because we gotta
ironic because
trust
it's true.
ourselves.
It's true everywhere in everything. It's so annoying.
And I'm not naturally a person that lets things go. I'm very much I like control, I like planning, I like
Yep.
detail-oriented things, but
Yep.
yet on the stage I can. And I think maybe it's in part because the time is carved out that
Mhm.
I my brain can say, I can let things go here. It's safe to just let it go.
Mhm.
Because whatever happens on stage, I'm not expecting perfection. But in class, that's not true. Like, I often have a very hard time in class, especially in center, like, letting myself take up space
Hmm.
and dancing big because it's not a carved out space where I'm not trying to be perfect or I'm not trying to reach a goal. It
Yep.
becomes this, like, I am being judged, and the teacher's judging you in a good way. Well, if you have a good teacher. There are
Yep.
teachers that are judging in bad ways, but
Yep.
if you're in those classes, leave them. It's not
Yep.
worth it. Just leave the environment now. I've been through that multiple times. Just give your permission to leave. It's
Yep.
okay. But it's so interesting, like when we had talked about our goals and when I was thinking about Point, it's like, w- where is this bridge between the stage and class? And what is so different between like a class with you versus an in studio class
Yep.
and a class I'm teaching? Because those feel so different to me.
Mhm.
And I want them to feel, I mean, they're going to feel different, but I want them to feel similar from a place of like, I can be authentically me.
Yep. Yeah, it's so fascinating the different places that we just randomly put
Just
rules
pressure.
around. Yeah, pressure around. And I think there's so much popularity right now in this phrase that like discipline is better than motivation and you should just always push yourself through things and do things no matter how you feel. But I think the real words that we need to think about is like permission. Do you giving yourself permission to practice every day? Are you giving yourself permission to mess up? Are you giving yourself permission to do all this stuff? Because if you want so badly to practice, but you don't give yourself permission to fail, or you don't give yourself permission to take up space, you're going to take all of your motivation and suck it
Mhm.
dry. And you're going to say, like, this isn't for me, like you were the first year. This isn't for me. I'm going to do this and hang up my shoes. You're not giving yourself permission to go along the journey. No amount of either discipline or motivation or someone yelling at you or anything is going to fix the problem that you didn't give yourself permission to take the steps and to like be in that messy middle area like that. Like you use that word permission a few times through this. It's like, where do we need to give ourselves more of that? And on the stage, it's like you give yourself, and I give myself carte blanche. Whatever you want in that
Yeah.
time, it's your time. If you make the whole thing up, you had a good time. That's all that matters. Like that's totally how I approach it too. Not with singing, interestingly, but with ballet for sure. It's just where once you see it in one place, I think it's just kind of tough in the beginning to see all the places you're not giving yourself that. And you're like,
Mhm.
how do I integrate all these areas of my life together? Because clearly I have access to it. Clearly I have access to it and I like it. And people like me when I'm in it. And it's like it feels good. So how do I get this elsewhere?
Yeah. It's interesting because in my teaching prep for this fall, I'm teaching at a competition studio, which is something I've not done before. And I'm teaching kids older. Well, one of my classes was to be 12-year-olds. They're 8-year-olds. Big pivot that first day of like what I planned for 12-year-olds does not work for 8-year-olds. But the other class is like the senior competition company. So like 16 to 18-year-olds. That I'm very much more comfortable there. But in preparing to teach, I was thinking a lot about how do I encourage them. I was using the word permission in my head to give themselves permission to fail. Because
Yep.
these are competition kids who don't love ballet. But how do I make this a safe space for them to start to say, maybe I can like ballet? Even
Yeah.
if I don't love it, maybe I can find value here. Maybe I can find freedom, expression. I can find improvement, my goals. And one of the things I landed on was we're going to do something every single class to intentionally fail, because these kids are going into competitions and conventions where they will fail, just like we will make mistakes on stage. It's just a given. Like, we're never going to be perfect on stage. But if we can practice that in our day-to-day life, then when it happens on stage or happens in a convention or a competition or a work meeting or a presentation, our body already knows, hey, it's okay. Like, this happens, we know how to move through it. And they've responded really well to it. And I've been kind of thinking, okay, how do I do this for myself now? Like,
Yeah.
where are my daily practices of failure and permission?
Mhm.
And some of that has been like a recognition of, wow, I'm not actually giving myself this space. And how can I move towards giving myself that space?
Mhm. I think one of my favorite tricks for writing is to write a bad one
Hmm.
first.
Yep.
Like, right? I'm sure you've heard this. Like, if you can't write the email, write a bad one first. So then you like write a bad one and you're like, okay, well, I mean, that was fine. Or like, oh, okay, you just gives you permission to write, to like just do it wrong first. And I think that's like what now when I teach pirouettes, I don't teach pirouettes landing in fourth anymore. I teach pirouettes landing everywhere except for fourth. I teach pirouettes landing front, landing 30 degrees out, landing for like I just teach pirouettes. Can you put your foot down anywhere on purpose? And then eventually one of those places will be the one that you want to land in. But if you tell people you have to land in that one spot, they just like there's no space to think. It's just like totally gone. So it's like, where are those areas in our life where we're like, this has to be perfect, this has to be perfect, that can't be different, this can't be a failure, that can't be this. It's like, it's everywhere. I'm sure it's everywhere. I'm sure it's places we haven't even noticed. And I think it's exactly what you said. When you feel that tension, when you feel that internal tension or that lack of authenticity, I feel like those are the spots where we're just not, where we have some like rule that we've made up for ourselves. We just like made it up at one day and decided it was the deal. Like we just decided that was like the end all be
This is
all.
it.
This is it. This is my definition of success. And I will beat myself up every time I don't get this one micro thing correct. Okay. It's cool.
Yeah. And I'm very good at beating myself up. I've realized, like,
It's a skill.
the very well developed skill
Yeah.
that I wish wasn't as well developed, but I'm learning to value the work that I did to get there
Hmm.
in being able to judge myself really harshly and pivoting that skill to something that helps me instead of harms me. So instead of judging the skill in the first place, to say, how can I use this strength, this stubbornness, this goal setting, the detail oriented perfectionist, and use it to help instead of use it
Hmm.
to harm? The
Hmm.
skill itself is not a bad thing. It's just how I'm using it that's harmful.
Mm. Yeah, that's nice. Like a hammer is not inherently harmful, but it could be if
Yeah,
you use it the
but
wrong
it
way.
can be really harmful. I talk about this a lot with clients too, of like any coping skill we have can be maladaptive
Hmm.
or it can be helpful and
Hmm.
it can change throughout time. So you have to pay attention to saying, like, which one is helping me now?
Hmm.
And am I using this in a way that's helpful? And if the answer is no, pick a different one. That's why we do a whole toolkit of tools. We
Hmm.
don't just have one hammer, we have a hammer, a screwdriver, a wrench. I don't know what else you have in a toolkit, but if you're
Other
trying to
things.
screw in a nail with a hammer, it might work, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, you can hammer or screw into the wall with brute force, but it would be much easier to use a screwdriver
Right.
and screw it into the wall. And so we can just change the tool. Like, we don't have to be stubborn and be like, no, I have to use this hammer because
Yeah.
this is right. No, sometimes the hammer's not right. Pick up the screwdriver.
Hmm. Now I'm curious how this has all gone for you because now you choreograph for other people too in a few different contexts, right? You've choreographed
Mhm.
not only solos for people for the festival, but you also have choreographed group dances for the festival and you've choreographed for your Facet Dance Collective and you're going to be choreographing for your Nutcracker adaptation coming in January for Facet. So how is all of this working with choreographing for other people? Because that's a whole different thing, helping someone else tell
Mhm.
their story versus telling your own story. And yeah, I'm curious the similarities, differences, how that whole experience has been.
Yeah, it's been really fun and also hard and frustrating and disappointing and the best, like, all at once.
Yeah.
Um, I think when I'm choreographing for myself, it can feel really natural because I know my body really well. I know what feels good. I know what challenges me. I know the goal I'm going towards, but I also know how my body expresses certain emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true for everybody. And so what I found in especially in choreographing solos for other people is I tend to go watch a lot of their videos
Mm.
and see like, okay, how do you express sadness or how does your body naturally express joy? And getting to know like it's much easier to choreograph for a dancer that I know than a dancer I don't know.
Hmm.
I did get into that trap with the festival this year is that I was choreographing a group on a lot of dancers I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so when you don't know a dancer and know their abilities, it's really hard to know like what is the right level of challenge? What is something that is right up to that level of it's challenging, you're going to work towards it, but not past your tolerance point so your nervous system freaks out. If you go back to the nervous system, if you give adults choreography that's too hard, their nervous system will start to get in their way. It doesn't matter if they can learn it, their brain can get it, their body could get it. If their nervous system thinks it's past that point, they're not going to be able to get there, especially in a short time frame like the festival where you're learning the group piece over 8 or 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, that was a very specific challenge and one that I think I'm still kind of working through. How do you better assess levels?
Mm-hmm.
And one way of we're thinking about doing that for Facet is instead of auditions, we're doing a placement class
Mm-hmm.
so that I visually get to see dancers and see what they're capable of before I finalize any choreography I'm setting on someone.
Right.
And that it's not going to be a lot. I'm only going to get one class with them, but it is going to be better than having nothing because I will get a lot of dancers that I don't know or don't teach in that context that I'm choreographing for. Um, I think my brain likes to be like, we're going to go for it. We're going to create this really cool, intricate piece of choreography. But I'm learning that you have to step it back for groups
Mm-hmm.
and almost choreograph it like too easy,
Yes.
like so simple that you're like, this is kind of boring.
Yes.
Because you can always make something harder, but it's much harder to make something easier as you go. Um, and that was a big challenge with my group piece with this festival was that what I had choreographed was actually too hard
Yeah.
and too intricate. And my ability to pick up on that quick enough was a little bit delayed. And so it made some of the process feel tense for between me and the dancers felt anxious about it and I felt anxious about it and we had to find a way to work through that and we got there. But that was one of the big lessons I think is go simpler with your choreography, especially when you don't know the dancers, because you can always make something more intricate.
Mm-hmm.
And the choreography doesn't have to be intricate to be meaningful. And I think sometimes my brain is like, no, I want the nuanced accents because I hear it in the music and like I feel it in my body. But that's not what creates meaning. What creates meaning in a piece of choreography is how people perform it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the choreography itself, although the choreography is a part. Like we can't completely separate it. But I think my brain likes to say the choreography is like first and foremost, that's how I create meaning.
Mm.
But I had to step back and be like, actually, that's only 10% of it. 90% of it is actually what the dancers are doing and what they're bringing to the choreography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, when you think about the difficulty of a corps de ballet steps versus the
Mhm.
soloist, it's incredibly different. There's a lot of repetition in the corps de ballet. There's a lot of steps underneath yourself. Traveling lines take a
Mhm.
lot of effort. I learned that lesson too. I learned that lesson too the first year in my in our group piece that we did, the one with the live singer to Hallelujah, where just like
Mhm.
keep your formation simple. If you've got a lot of people on the stage, formations are really difficult and they're really stressful. And if
Mhm.
people are stressed, then they can't remember the choreography, then they can't have a good time and they feel anxious that they're going to run into people. And it's just not an enjoyable experience for the dancers to get unless they have a long enough time to really learn it, which for a group of people more new to it might be months of time that it
Mhm.
would take for them to settle into it. So this year for our beginner piece, there was no formation. There was
Yeah.
zero formation. We stood in lines and we went in and out, and I think it turned out great. I think it turned out great. Nobody was stressed about it. It was, well, I mean, still memorizing choreography can be stressful, but like it was not, the rehearsal process was smooth
Yeah.
and there was no stress in the rehearsal process because it was just about looking at each other and engaging with the audience and the musical accents and timing. But I had to make that same change. I was like, well, what if they're bored? What if they're bored with the choreography? Or what if they don't think it's fun enough? Or what if they think it's like really kind of lame? And then I'm like, but they're going to have so much fun. Like they're going to have so much fun doing it. And that's what matters more is the experience that they have connecting with the audience. The audience doesn't need you up there stressed just to make interesting formations. It's not helpful. Like it's not helping anybody.
Yeah, I just rewatched that piece this morning. I was like, wow, this looks beautiful.
So
Like,
good. Right?
looks so good, like gives you chills. And
Yeah.
I mean, we walk in a circle around ourselves, but like
Yep.
7 steps in your little quasi square. Like we're not moving around the stage, but it was like breathtaking. And that
So
was like one of
beautiful.
those moments for me of like, oh, I don't have to maybe work so hard. Like there's a lot of hard work that goes into helping dancers become good performers,
Yes.
but you can it's again that letting go, like let go some. Let go.
Let go. And I agree. I had that same experience rewatching that piece back because I was very worried, even like leading up until the festival. I was worried that it was going to be lame and not a fun challenge and not a good piece and wouldn't show on the stage and would just like look really boring. And then the first time everybody did it, I was like, wow, okay, okay, lesson learned. Got it. It was beautiful. It gave me chills the first time I watched everybody do it all the way through. And I was just like, just turning around yourself and everything I preach in artistry class, the gaze to and away from the audience really
Mhm,
impacts everything, how you're interacting with people on the stage, the feeling that people have on the stage. These are what make the dance meaningful, not the steps, not the choreography. I mean, of course, that's a vehicle to it, right? Like just like a song, the melody is what makes it that song, but like that's not what makes it art. That's not what makes it meaningful. That's not what makes any of that stuff where I do think for you and your solos, the intricacy and what you hear
mhm,
is part of what makes it meaningful for you because you're matching that inner feeling with what comes out, but you're doing it in a way that works for your body. Probably someone
mhm,
else who choreographed on you accents that they wanted, you'd be like, that doesn't work for me. It's like, it's scratching your own itch versus like trying to get someone else to scratch an itch for you. It doesn't work. It doesn't work the same way. And it's an incredibly difficult lesson to learn. I think even just when you're teaching a beginner class
mhm.
to realize that the basics is plenty joyful. There is plenty to do, and it is probably not boring.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that moment in rehearsal where we did it the first time and just, like, watching your face. Like, I wish I had gotten a picture or video of you just, like, your whole body lit up and you're like, almost speechless, like, "That was so good. What do I even do now? This is rehearsal 1.
That was
We
literally
have,
my
like,
feeling. I
3
was just
more."
like, well, we're just gonna run it again because I liked it.
Like, we're just gonna keep doing it. And then everyone on stage was reacting to your body language. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Wow, I'm good at this." And, like,
Yeah.
that helped everyone, especially the beginners on stage, feel even more comfortable.
Yeah, it was like we had nothing to rehearse. I had almost no notes for you guys. Like we did go through and
Yeah,
work the timing and everything, but was like, in my mind, I'm like, does this make me a bad choreographer? I have no notes for them. Should I have more notes for them? And I'm like, I have whatever. I have nothing. We're gonna roll with it. They're not worried about me
yeah,
giving them notes. They're happy that it looks good, I'm sure.
yeah. It was interesting too to hear because at the festival, you just talk to a lot of people throughout the day, just like off and on, talking to people in waltz rehearsal versus people in the swans rehearsal, which was the opening of swans, the entrance of the swans for people who don't have that detail, which does have a lot of moving patterns and you like move in a line going in and it's kind of a lot.
Yeah, there's a
And the
pyramid, there's a
difference in
circle.
stress levels
Yeah.
was rather extreme.
Yes.
And even though those people were still having fun, like just watching that juxtaposition back to back was a really interesting thing to watch to be like, okay, there you can have these two different experiences. There's pros and cons in both of them, but like there's different management of both of them. Like how you speak to people who are trying to get a formation on stage and what you're trying to pull out of them is much different than okay, we have the choreography, it looks really good. How do we pull out more of the emotion
Right.
and knowing like when to do what?
Right. Yeah, it was such a different experience because the stress of the formations and getting in the right place and being on the left foot and being on the right foot was a very much different experience. Even though I did advertise it as a more difficult piece, I think it's sometimes you don't realize what that experience is going to actually feel like, that it is more stressful because, I mean, that piece was it's very exposed. Everyone's wearing a flat tutu and you can tell if you're on the right foot and the lines need to be straight and you're running around and it is a more stressful, and the rehearsal process is a bit more tense because everyone's worried about being in the right place. The anxiety of the performers is higher. So
Mhm.
you can't get your message across as easily because people are stressed and they're blanked out in their mind. And so they're not focused on what you're saying. So your corrections don't land because they have bigger fish to fry. They're just worried that they're not going to look good on stage. So your notes don't actually even land because the people are stressed about the success of the piece, and like they feel like there's a, you know, a measuring stick that it's going to look good, or that they're going to let me down, or they're going to let each other down, or whatever, you know, whatever it is. It's a whole different, it's a whole different experience and a whole different feeling, for sure. Not that there's not value in it. There's so much value in it. Like, I think they learned a lot and had a great time, but it's just a very different, you can see, we saw at the festival, now we had actually two examples of the most simple possible formations, which was standing in place, versus the most complicated possible. And then you can juxtapose, as choreographers, you can look at that and say, okay, what can I take away from this for future experiences? Because the experience of the dancer, I think the experience of the dancer does matter. I mean, maybe if it's a professional company and it's their job to do it, maybe it doesn't matter as much. I don't know. I still feel like it matters how your employees feel when they're working for you. I still feel like that matters. But if it's their part of creating the art, I mean, in the case of the festival, or with many adults, the adults are paying to be in part of the performance, not vice versa. Their experience matters much more than my experience as a choreographer. I mean, you know, the experience that they have on stage is like huge. It could be life-changing for them. For some, it might mean in their head, this isn't for me. Or for some, it might mean, oh, this is for me. It could be a validator in one direction or another of some fears they have, or some, you know, budding dancer inside that you could let out. It can be a huge deal for somebody.
Yeah, because for adults, it's not just like a childhood hobby. It's something that they've invested a lot in. They're taking time out of their busy schedules. You're often getting people that haven't been on stage before, or haven't been on stage in that capacity. And so forming lines, moving around the stage, that is like a whole skill set in itself that
Yes.
when you're an adult beginner, you often don't have access to performance opportunities. So you don't have access to learn that skill. And it's not, we don't do that really in class, although I do talk about it in my class when I have them form lines, like get in windows for center combinations. Like, this is when someone tells you to form a line in a dance, you're practicing that here. So, like, let's actually make lines, please. It's
Yeah.
not just stand in clumps. But in a lot of adult centers, like, you don't even get that in class because maybe there's only 3 people in your adult open class. And
Right.
so you're not making lines, you're just like spreading out on the floor.
Right.
Or you're in a teen class where those things aren't really explained to you,
Yep.
and you just sort of follow the patterns and like hope you're picking up on the right etiquette.
Yeah. I think another one of these skills that you learn as a choreographer about dancers is that dancing close to other people is a skill too. Like, I take it for granted, and maybe you've had a similar experience. I take it for granted that it's normal. You know, you might need to do a pirouette with somebody next to you. You might need to do a waltz with somebody next to you. But people will get frustrated that they're bumping each other. But that's a normal part of the process. And I think that that can be very jarring for people to realize how close you
Mhm.
dance with people. Like, you know, I'll get people complain that their house is too small to dance. And I'm like, you got to practice dancing next to stuff. Like, if you want
Yeah,
to be, I mean, when you're performing next to people, you're practicing dancing next to people. Like,
all the time.
but it's a totally different scale. And I think that it took me some time as a choreographer to realize that that's something I needed to help people understand, that like, yeah, you're going to kick them, but you need to pay attention to that so
Yeah.
that you don't kick them. Like, this is part of it, is you paying attention to not kicking them. Like, that's part of it. It's not bad. It's not a
No, it's
failure.
just
They're
a
not in a
thing.
way. They're not in the wrong place. Don't get mad at them for kicking you. Like, just, we're all
It
learning together how to
happens.
understand our limbs.
Yeah, and I think we go into it with adults assuming that because we don't, well, I do hit things in normal day life because I don't have great proprioception and I'm clumsy. But for the most part, we walk around in our adult lives and like don't hit other things. And so we assume when we're dancing, like, oh, we're just going to naturally not hit other things. But it's not true. Like, when people are sitting next to you, when arms are controlled flailing,
Yeah.
like legs, we are going to run into each other. Spatial
Yep.
awareness is a completely different skill in the context of dance
Mm-hmm.
than it is in day to day life.
Yeah. So I'm curious, one more question on this choreography thing. You mentioned in when you were just chatting about what choreography is to you, that the choreography itself, when you're creating for somebody else, is like 10% of what you're creating. What do you suppose the other 90%, like, what is that? What have you kind of come to see the other parts of it?
Yeah, so I think the other 90% is getting to know the dancer and the story that they're wanting to tell. So I mean, I don't think I've really ever said no to a choreography, like someone asked me for choreography, but I do require a dancer to have an idea or a story or a theme,
Mm-hmm.
so then we can build off of that. And everyone has had like, I want to tell this story in this way, and then we'll together kind of collaborate. So the other 90% is really learning about them and letting their voice and their story speak through whatever I put as
Mm-hmm.
movement.
Mm.
and then working with them to say, okay, here's a base movement.
Mhm.
Um, so I think Chris would be fine with me talking about this, but Chris is a good example. I choreographed a solo for her to a piece called Bluebird with this idea of becoming, and we used a butterfly imagery. And so at the first time I taught it, we had these like brushes and fondue that were at 45. And I quickly learned like this feels completely unnatural in her body. And so I
Mhm.
said, okay, let's change, same idea, same kind of brushing 3-3 pattern. Just improv with that. Show me what feels comfortable. What does your body naturally do? And then we took that and we made it fit the original choreography because it was important to give her something that felt more natural in her body.
Mhm.
Because when I'm choreographing, it's probably not natural because I found my body tends to do things that are not natural to other people, which is like an interesting insight into my own choreography process. But also the musicality I hear is sometimes different and sometimes helping the dancer just hear that musicality as a step or helping what stands out to you in this and how do I tell your story well through this? And that doesn't require them to choreograph it or to come up with the choreography because they're asking me to like step in the gap. I want to tell the story through movement, but I don't have the like movement language to like put it together. Can you help me? And so it becomes very much a collaborative process
Mhm.
together where I'm playing the part of like, here's some movement. Now let's play with it together and make it fit you and your story.
Mhm. It's very much like almost like ghostwriting,
Yeah.
as opposed to like you have a vision that you're trying to get someone else to make, right? That's like I
Yeah.
think there is that way of
Mhm.
choreography, and I think that's where you do get a lot of tension when you have a specific vision that the person is not creating how you want it to be created. I think that can create that tension, but this process of like um yeah, almost like ghostwriting. Like they're saying, I don't have the vocabulary to tell this story. I want your help getting this story, really, really poignant. And then you help shape it for them and with them and on them. I think that's like maybe when people say choreographing on somebody, this is like a little bit closer to that type of process than like I have a vision in my head that you're gonna make, which is a very different situation.
Yeah, which is interesting because I feel like a lot of my facet choreography fits the second one more. Like I have to have the vision and put it on because I am very much more of like I'm the artistic director. I'm putting together the whole production so that people expect you to be in that role.
Right.
But I still have to balance that with like who are the dancers in front of me.
Right.
So a core piece, if I have, let's say, a renverse in a core piece, but half my core can't do a renverse, I have to adjust my vision
Right.
because we're not going to learn a renverse. Maybe in the time span of Nutcracker for Facet, we could learn a renverse, but in most contexts, I'm probably not going to be teaching brand new moves to people in the context of a production.
Right.
I'm going to say, hey, go to your class, go watch videos. Julie has great ones. Here's the library. I directed lots of people to your waltz turn videos. It's like, I'm not going to teach you a waltz turn, but I learned it from Julie, and this is the video I used. So like, go watch this one. Um, but you have to do both when you're doing a big production and being the artistic director. And I think it's probably similar for you in the group pieces for IBF,
Yeah.
in that you have to come with a very clear vision but have enough flexibility that you're meeting the dancers where they're at.
Right. Yes, and it's a balance between vision and flexibility where you want the vision to be clear, but when you change it, you don't want them to feel like they failed or that they let you
Yeah.
down, and that's why you have to change it. So I think that's a tricky message to say, like when you say this isn't working for you, let's try something else. Like how like phrasing that appropriately, I think is like because it's meant to be a collaboration. It's not that I have this vision and you failed and so we're changing it because we need to dumb it down for you. It's not that process. It's like I have a vision and it can be done in many different ways, and let's see the way that you're going to be able to bring this to life in what works for you. And I think even just that phrasing of the collaboration makes a big difference in how the relationship builds and where that trust is and where they feel free to show you things versus that they feel like they can't do what you want or whatever that is.
Yeah, and also when it's not working and I have to say like, "Hey, we have to change it," oftentimes that's my fault. It's not
Yeah.
really the dancer's fault.
Right.
It's like I've put something out there that isn't working,
Right.
whether that's timing-wise, stage-wise, the group of dancers together. That's my responsibility as a choreographer, and I I mean, I try really hard to not and give this message to the dancers, like, if I'm changing something, it's not you have failed me. I'm changing something because, like, you're inspiring me that we're gonna do it better.
Yeah.
And that might mean we simplify it, but that's because you've inspired me that we don't need to do all this, like, extra stuff. We can just, walk back and forth, and that is gonna be meaningful enough.
Yeah.
Actually more meaningful than what was originally my vision that looked like complete chaos. Like, it wasn't
Right.
you that failed it, it was my vision that failed us as a team.
Yeah. And it's so, the phrase simplify is so tricky because it's like sometimes simplifying makes it more powerful.
Mhm.
And when it's too chaotic or too messy or whatever, it's not powerful. Like when you think about, like we were talking about with the juxtaposition of the group piece I choreographed the first year of IABF versus the group piece I choreographed this last year, it was so much simpler and it had so much more impact. Like because
Mhm.
it was clear and direct and the audience knew what they were looking at and the dancers knew what they were doing. And but it wasn't quote unquote simplified. It was just made impactful. It was like
Yeah.
we deleted the cruft. It's like the phrase like I forget who said it, but it was like, I think it was Mark Twain. He said, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter
Yeah.
because it takes time to edit to the crux of something. And sometimes when you see the thing in
Yeah.
its full strength glory, you're like, no, no, no. The only thing that mattered here was the arm. So let's cut everything else out because the only thing that is important here was the arm. And I thought the leg and the face and the blah, blah, blah was all important. And then, I see now that I see it on all of you guys that the only thing that matters is this one thing. So I'm cutting the rest of it out, not because you didn't do it well, but because now I see what the point was that I was trying to make. And now I see all the words I can delete that I don't need anymore because now I see the purpose of what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and what people in the audience remember is often, like, the simplest moments. Um,
Yeah.
like, one of the moments in your solo with the ears, I don't know exactly how you do the hands, but, like, that's
Yeah.
one of the
That's
most
ringing in my
powerful
ears.
ringing in your
Yeah.
ears, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing that most people in the audience talked about when they were talking about your piece. You did, like, all this amazing, cool, really innovative point choreography, but people remember you putting your hands around your ears, and it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, there doesn't have to be this much pressure on the choreography." Like, the
No.
choreography can speak volumes by just being a vehicle for us to be present and authentic. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be authentic and complicated. It can be, and that's really beautiful too, but you want the balance of that. You need the moments that aren't that and the moments that are just breath or standing still or prepping for a step because that's where the audience feels the most connected to you as a performer.
Yeah. That's when you think about great speeches, it's the ones who paused.
Yeah.
It's never the ones who just ramble, 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 ramble with all these long sentences or fancier words or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, no, people who use clear, direct, simple words and pause.
Yeah. Like, I got to see Wolf Works with ABT this summer. Oh, so good. But the most powerful moment was as Isabella Boyson walked a lap around the stage
Hmm.
in parallel, bare feet, not ballet walking. And I was like in tears. And she did so many other incredible things, but just her walking a lap around the stage and the amount of emotion and presence she was able to bring towards that, like the technique that allowed her to create that was just like the foundation. And it was like, oh, I want to do that. Like, yeah, I want to do all the cool, amazing turns and like flattes and I have all these dance goals, but I want to have that kind of technique that allows me to be that free and present and authentic just walking.
Yep. Same in life, just being.
Yeah. Like, I want that in my day to day life. I don't want it just dancing.
Yeah. It's tough to remember because we get caught up in the fancy stuff and we have goals and it's like such a weird combination because yeah, in the studio, like me too, I'm pushing all the time and working on everything and working on all the ballet stuff. I have big ballet goals. I want to always be getting better. But like when it comes to the stage, when it comes to communicating through dance, it's a different situation. It's a totally different situation. Communicating through dance and choreographing through dance is about those impactful moments. I call them in my mind the moments that matter. So if I'm mapping out a song, I go
Mm,
through and I'm like, what are the moments that matter in this? And then put those down first and then fill in the rest around there. And it's like, these are the moments that really mean something to me and that need to be powerful. So what needs to happen before and after these so that this is the peak and then everything else is like lower volume. This is like,
yeah.
and that moment with the ringing in the ears was the moment that mattered to me. that was the moment that mattered to me the most. And so it's great that that's what people remembered, because all the other stuff is like fine. And I wanted to challenge myself on point, but like the story of that voice is like into the unknown. It's like there's this freaking voice that won't leave me alone and keeps pushing me to do bigger and bigger things. And I'm exhausted and I'm busy and I don't want to do this new stuff. But then eventually you kind of follow the voice and it takes you to greatness. But it's just like, this is just a ringing in my ears. Like, get out of my ears. Like, I don't want to hear you anymore. Like this, that's it. That's like the point of the song, is just like, get out of my freaking ears. I'm minding my own business and you're calling me to adventure when I am fine. I'm fine. Like, leave me alone. Right. So,
But we're also like the point of, we think we're fine, but we're
right,
not.
right.
And I think that's what IBF does for me each year, is like this moment of, I don't have to accept just fine. Like I can listen to that ring in my ears because I also have that voice. And it's like, I can give myself permission to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to just settle
No.
for like what is comfortable and easy in my life. And that's like where we become the most human and most fulfilled, is to say like, no, I'm gonna take the pain, I'm gonna take the grief because I want to be me.
We have to follow the voice.
And all of the scary, terrifying fears that come along with following that voice.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why the Into the Unknown song resonates with me so much, because anytime you go into something big and scary, and you're doing this with Facet and with these big productions that you're putting on, you're putting on a full-length adapted Nutcracker with adult performers, and you're choreographing all of this from scratch, and you're going to set it on all these people, and I'm sure that's big and scary and unknown, and you have to learn about Marley and about lighting and about backstage and about stage rentals and about funding and about all the things, costumes and sizing and everything that goes into putting on a production. And it is big and scary and unknown, but that voice inside is honestly going to bother you until you follow it. So the sooner you follow it, I mean, the better, because otherwise you just have to be bothered until you until you follow it, because it's really not going away.
No, I think you got to just befriend the voice too. Of like, just like when you're walking into a season of grief, just become friends with the grief. It's not going away. If you choose not to feel it, it's just going to get louder. Just become its friend and say, hey, I welcome you here. I know this is going to feel shitty a lot of the time. I know it's going to be anxious, and like, it's okay. Like, you can be here and I can be here too.
Yep. And there's something to be learned from whatever the voice is saying, whatever the big thing is, because I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that this thing is, this dreaming and this creation and whatever it is that we long for. But whatever it is like where everything we have now came from. Everything that we have now as humans came from somebody following this voice. And so imagine if all the people who dreamed of having a home to live in didn't follow that voice and didn't learn how to make materials to build homes. And imagine if the people who had that voice didn't learn how to refrigerate food, and who didn't learn how and didn't follow that voice to learn how to record music, and who didn't follow that voice to learn how to make movies, and who didn't follow that voice. So it's like that voice is what we owe to the people coming after us and to the people who live with us now. And it's like that voice somehow is the thread that takes humanity to the next level over time. It's like, yeah, it sucks to follow that voice. And you hear about all the people who wrote great things and who invented great things. They were like tortured by this voice, but they did. And now we all living our life. Now our voice calls us to more and bigger and better things, and different things and things unique to each of us, and we each have our own voice. And I don't know, I feel like the more I've done and the further I've gotten, the more you see like this voice is the beginning of everything we have that's good in our lives and in each other's lives. This voice is telling us what we have to offer to other people.
Yeah, like imagine if young adult Julie didn't listen to that voice. Like, I probably wouldn't be the dancer I am today. I probably wouldn't be teaching, wouldn't be making a dance collective, putting on adult production. I mean, I probably would have found dance, but there would have been no other resources for an adult to start and get good technique.
It's like that voice tells us, that voice is, I don't know, maybe it was you calling to me in the past. I don't know. I don't know who it was, but whoever told me that I should start, that I should start ballet and follow this voice. And every time it was hard, quit what I was doing and go to the next adventure. And it's always sucked. Every time has been terrifying. I don't know, but you over time it gets easier in the sense that you accept that it's part of your personal life and part of what you personally have to offer, and it's easier to follow it than it is to ignore it.
Yeah. I'd love to know, obviously this podcast we don't have other people with us, but
Yeah.
I'd love to know like what the other Broche ballerinas voices are telling them,
Mm,
or what the people, the banter people listening to the podcast, even if they're not Broche dancers,
yeah.
like what are these, how your voice is echoing, how my voice is echoing, like where are those echoes rippling? And
Mm,
sometimes, I mean, being a therapist, I don't always get to see them. I get to play a small part of a story, but not see the ending.
right.
But it'd be kind of cool if we could like see the endings in this case, or like see the middles.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people whose voices got me to where I am. Like everyone has built the path for the people who are coming after them who need whatever it is that their voice called them to. It's just like everything, and I think that the idea of, the festival theme this year, the Together We Shine that I made is just like, to me, the festival became something that I didn't imagine it would be. I mean, it's not at all what I had planned on making, but it was what everybody needed. And it was what everybody
Yeah.
needed. And together we've created into a thing that lets us become the version of ourselves that we wish we could be. And myself too. I mean, it lets us all shine. Like and I think it can sound like a little bit cheesy, but it's like really, I think very true. Like together we shine and we cannot shine alone. We make everything together. We don't exist in a vacuum. The reason I can do everything I do is because of everyone who's come before me and because of everybody who surrounds me now. And same for everybody who's in the world rippling out, whatever they're doing, whatever voices brought them here and whatever voices they're following that's bringing other people to where they're going. It's like we're all in a chain, like walking one link at a time to where we're trying to go. It's like, I don't know. I think that voice is the driver. Yeah, it'd be super fascinating to hear. Everyone's got a different voice. Everyone has a different voice. Everyone's voice is saying something different. Not everybody's voice is saying like you that they need to that they would create a dance collective or that they would
Yeah.
choreograph the art, or not everyone's voice is saying what I've wanted to create. Everyone's voice is a little bit different and a little bit different, and that's how you get, I think, the world to be created in the way that it has been created now. I really think that this is how we've gotten to where we are.
Yeah.
It's
It
kind of
makes me
crazy.
think like when I watch your solo or thinking about watching my solo back, like seeing all the people that are in that story through the dancing,
Mm-hmm.
like the untold pieces of true colors are all the mentors that have like sat with me and friends that have sat with me and deconstructed and talked about sexuality and talked about identity and authenticity, and like all of that is in that moment too. And
Mm-hmm.
like I can be that free and authentic because of the people that surrounded me and like held me up and held my hand when I couldn't hold my own hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is so powerful about the performances at the festival, is we have this tangible, visible, like people in the audience doing the hand holding and clapping. And you get to see this like beautiful picture of all the people you don't know that have helped this person get to the stage.
Right.
And like my mind is just like, oh, this is the best.
Yeah.
Like it's just magic. Like, I yeah, I don't ever see the mistakes or like, oh, this person could improve. Not like that doesn't even cross my mind. It's just like my brain is speechless
Yep.
because of how powerful and shining like on stage people are.
Yeah, they really do shine. People just come alive on the stage. It's something kind of miraculous to
Yeah.
watch when you see somebody just like become a different person in that moment, like become themselves. I really think you watching them become themselves in that moment for whatever, I don't know why it is. I don't know. I don't exactly understand the mechanics behind it. Maybe no one can. Maybe it's just magic. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But whatever, whatever it is, it's something about that moment, about that preparation, and
Yeah.
about those people watching you that causes people to just like align in that moment and be fully there. And that's a very unique, and I've never lived in another time period, but this time period, being wholly present and being wholly in one place without needing to be somewhere else is very unique and very precious and
Yeah.
very fleeting. And so to have those moments together where we do not need to be somewhere else, where we are fully there and present, is incredibly powerful. And I think that's what people start seeing that they want in more of their life. I think it can open someone's eyes to what they could be in the rest of their life.
Yeah. It very much has done that for me. It echoes back and like how do I be authentically me in my daily life and not just in dance or not just at the festival.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's not going to be the same exact thing, but there are huge aspects of that that like we all deserve to have in our daily lives. Like we deserve to have places that we feel safe to be authentic and present and
Mhm.
human and have all the spectrum of feelings
Yep.
and create and be connected, and like that is possible for every one of us. And to just if we go back to the very beginning, let go and give ourselves permission to lean into that amidst all the feelings, the whole spectrum of everything.
Yeah. So powerful. I think we touched on all of our points, Kelsey.
I think we did too, which
I
is
think
kind
we
of impressive.
I think we somehow touched on all of our points. We did go 75 minutes, but I think we touched on all
Oops.
of our points. And anybody who is still listening at this point, Kelsey and I want to hear what your voice says to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, we want to hear what your voice says to you. So reach out. Kelsey is at Facet Dance Collective, and reach out to me at Broche Ballet and tell us what your voice is telling you. We want to know what your, whether it's ballet or something else in life. Yeah, we want to know. We want to know where you're being called to and where you feel the resistance to following that voice out into the scary unknown, because I think that's where the good stuff lies. So if you're still here with us, maybe you want some more good stuff. If you're not here with us, I understand you've got a busy life, but if you're still here, reach out. We'd love to talk. Yeah. Thanks so much, Kelsey, for being here and for your very thoughtful way that you approach things. And it's a very interesting combination of thoughtful and analytical at the same time, which is very, very refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
All right, dancers, that was the show. If you'd like to stay in touch with Kelsey and the Facet Dance Collective, please check out the description. We'll have all of her details. I'll be back in your ears next week with another amazing episode. And don't forget, if you're a dancer or a teacher and you'd like to be on the show, please do reach out to me at hello@brocheballet.com. And with that, I wish you very happy dancing.